Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the Varied Life. Steve here, the retired hobby tech guy who is retired in Korea. And we're putting down a vanilla latte. I make my own, and it is just wonderful. But we're going to get into some other information. We're going to be talking about being retired in Korea, and we're going to talk about knives, tariffs, gold, silver, and the rental market here in Korea. So yeah, a lot of interesting things. And for those of you who are curious, it is Saturday, the 15th of February. It's about 8:05 a.m. So yeah, and the weather's been getting unseasonably warm at this time, and currently we're looking at 29 degrees and a high today of 46, which is actually pretty good. Air quality is going to be a little rough, some fine particulates, but that's kind of the norm for Korea. So today, yeah, we're going to be talking about being retired in Korea and some of the news. So let's jump right into it. Okay, here we have it. We're going to be talking about the very first thing is education authorities scramble to bolster student safety after a 7-year-old's death. For those of you who don't know, unfortunately, what happened, a teacher who had been teaching for 26 years, who had received numerous awards for being a good teacher, had struggled with depression for a number of times, and she went and bought a knife, which they recorded her on CCTV. Just over a 6-inch knife the day before, and she got a 7-year-old student, stabbed her to death, and then she did self-inflicting harm upon herself, and then she later admitted that she killed the student. There was no rhyme or reason. She just wanted somebody to go with her, and then apparently she chickened out, which is absolutely crazy. So yeah, this is really strange because you don't see a lot of this in Korea, and so this is outside the norm. Excuse me. This is outside the norm of what we see for Koreans and in crime and things like this. But this has sent shockwaves through Korea for a couple of reasons. One, because of the knife crime, which anybody can buy a knife, but it is what it is. Crazy people will do crazy things, and if you outlaw everything, crazy people will still end up hurting others in some way, shape, or form. But the other thing is there were some other articles that I looked over, and it ends up that it's premeditated murder because she purchased the knife the day before the murder. And the other interesting thing is that this teacher was the week prior, not in this article, but another article, what she ended up doing is that she apparently had sprained or broken the arm of another teacher about a week prior to this incident. But the whole scuttlebutt, and now I can't find articles on it, they've been taken down, of that teacher was still allowed to teach because of the lack of teachers. And so they're under a crunch, well, you gotta teach and blah, blah, blah. And she had a lot of time off struggling with depression, which been there, done that, know how that goes. But this is a little bit more than depression when you're talking about premeditated murder. So yeah, it's just a really very complicated thing that we end up seeing here. And this kind of comes to the point of where, what are we going to do for student safety? So a lot of this article talks about how they're going to provide first and second grade students a portable emergency device that can alert parents in urgent situations. When a student presses a button on the device, the parents will receive a notification. It also talks about how they're going to have fire departments and police patrols and expand the escort services and allowing officers and firefighters to accompany children leaving public care institutions. The local government plans to establish a safety network to notify parents of children deviate from their usual route home. And I remember this as I was a kid. You went to school, you walked home, uphill in the snow, throughout the entire year. And you didn't really have these problems. But unfortunately, we still have unfortunately, these incidents happening, and the government is coming to a place of where, they're going to try to do what they can to keep the students safe. The other problem that we end up seeing is, I think, the school and the education system itself, that they let this happen. They knew that this teacher had problems, but she was a good teacher, but she struggled with depression. But supposedly the week before, she broke another teacher's arm. And to me, that would be like, yeah, you need to go home. You need to get some help. And unfortunately, you're going to have things like this happening. But then we have this guy end up here. Police arrest a man for threatening to stab 50 people at Seoul Station. Now, Seoul Station is a big, big station. And we have a big, big guy here. 33-year-old suspect accused of posting a murder threat on an online community leaves the district court where he was arrested and questioned. This is really strange for me. I mean, this is just, when you see suspects in the United States who are arrested and they're brought out, their faces aren't blurred. And so you have, the innocent people that their faces aren't blurred, or police or anybody else, but then they blur the face of the person who is suspected, which is really strange. And there's even some where, if you watch the news, you'll see some high-profile crimes and things like that here in Korea. Obviously not as much as what we would see in the United States, but their faces are blurred out after they've been convicted. And so it's kind of like, I don't really understand the reason behind that. I mean, before you get charged and you're guilty and you went to court and you did it, I kind of understand that. But the whole blurring of the face thing just seems, I don't seem to understand that. So if you understand that, put that in the comment section down below. But this guy he made online threats to stab people in Seoul Station, said he intended to carry out the threats, but he didn't say why. He's going to stab any 50 people at Seoul Station on May 24th. And they arrested him in Goyang, Gyeonggi, at 7:20 p.m. on May 24th, which that's kind of late at night. You'd think you would want to, I'm not sure when he made the claims, but I don't know. I'm just assuming that as soon as they found out, they went and arrested him. The police obtained search warrant for an online community, DCI inside, earlier in the day after performing data analysis, and they were able to track down the suspect. The suspect has a history of criminal activity with more than 10 offenses on his record. So yeah, there you go. Some people, no matter how great of a society you have, they still want to see the world burn. They hurt and they want others to hurt. Some people just can't help themselves. Some people, I worked in the prison systems for 11 years, and some people just don't want to play by the rules. They don't respect others or the life liberty of others. And this is a result. So congratulations on the police doing their job on that. And then we're going to move into the clock is ticking for Korea and tariffs as they supposedly move for April. So January, February, boom, April. And we're in basically the middle of February. It's getting down because Trump has taken the American first stance, and he wants to level the playing field when it comes to tariffs and taxes and imports and exports and things like that. Because often there has been not a fair taxing or of imports or VAT or things like that. Other countries get a better deal than the United States, and that is true with Korea and China, and the differences have been huge for quite some time. So Trump, basically what he ends up saying is that he wants to level it out, and this is kind of causing some shockwaves. It ends up that implementing reciprocal tariffs on trading partners would take effect as early as 1 April. I wonder if this is an April Fool's joke. Probably not. In response, the Korean government said the impact would be limited due to the Korea-U.S. Free Trade Agreement. However, fears continue to grow among businesses here as the United States said it would first investigate countries with large trade deficits, naming Korea as one of the examples. Uh, it is what it is, but yeah, it's kind of interesting. So, and if you start looking into the trade and VAT tax and things like that, which if you live in Korea, you understand that if you order something from overseas, you're going to pay a VAT tax, which is about I don't know, about 10%, and then you might have some import fees or things, another 8%, somewhere around there. So it's a sizable chunk. But when we look at here, it ends up that for nearly 50 years, Korea has been applying a standard VAT tax of 10% on most goods and services, while the U.S. employs a sales tax system with an average rate of 6.6. The VAT is levied at multiple stages of production, distribution on domestic and international transactions, while sales tax is at the final point of sale. So basically, what the United States wants to end up doing, or Trump wants to end up doing, is kind of leveling the playing field in regards to taxes. So if you charge basically 10%, and we're going to charge 10%. So it is what it is. But that's kind of got some people here in Korea up in arms. What are we going to do? But again, the free trade agreement that Korea has with the United States, that kind of should quell some of the fears with that. But yeah, some interesting information. And there's a whole thing with Samsung and chip makers and, from China and then, trying to shift that to Korea and things like that. It is a concern. When he came out with this information, immediately Korea was like, whoa, he's going to destroy Korea. And now people are saying that, yeah, this isn't probably going to have the amount of destruction that they initially said. And of course, it's media hype and things like that. But with that, because of the continued poor economy here in Korea that is going through inflation, and of course the Ukraine war is kind of spurring a lot of that on. Korea moves to secure economic stability as Trump tariffs loom. So they're trying to take some stances and what they're going to do to impose reciprocal tariffs on trading partners. Nope. That's what Trump is doing, is to have reciprocal tariffs on trading partners. And Acting President Choi Sang-mok reassured the public on Friday that the impact of these tariffs may not significantly affect Korea's economy, but he emphasized the need for continued monitoring. So yeah, it ends up it's not going to be as bad as everybody thinks, but again, I think all of this is going to come into play where there's going to be some negotiation done. And Trump is the king of negotiations, and he's a businessman. He's not a politician. So this is new territory. I mean, it's not new because he was president before. So yeah, he's going to ruffle some feathers, and with his America First stance, and that's going to have some impact on foreign countries. And if you're living in a foreign country, that might be a concern to you because you might pay a little bit more. Either way, it's a thing, and just to be aware of what's going on. With that being said, with the poor economy in Korea, some of the things that people are doing is rushing to buy gold, except the Bank of Korea. Now, for those of you who don't know, when you read this, you might be thinking, oh, everybody's rushing to buy gold. Well, why wouldn't a Bank of Korea buy gold? Well, it's because the price of gold is pretty high, and you don't buy when gold or anything when it's high, you buy when it's low. So that kind of makes sense. But it ends up that what has been going on here with the gold, and this is again kind of related to Trump and the tariffs and so on and so forth, is a good hedge against inflation and a good keeper of wealth is through gold. It doesn't appreciate like stock markets do as much. I think there was something I was reading that was talking about within a couple of year time frame, multi-year time frame, that the stock market ended up with like a 300% increase, and there was only like a 70% increase for gold. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So anyway, gold prices have been smashing records as late, both globally and domestically. The closing price of 100 grams, which is 3.5 ounce, reached 160,000 won or $110 for the first time ever. And somebody said they finally bought gold. But the Bank of Korea has not expanded its gold holdings since 2013. Now, there have been some dips in gold, and a lot of countries have purchased gold when those dips had occurred as a hedge against inflation. So, but Korea hasn't bought anything since 2013, which is kind of, it's interesting. They hold 115 tons for more than a decade, which makes up 2% of the country's foreign exchange reserves. The gold holdings rank 38 in the world and 6 notches weaker than their 2013 spot, according to the World Gold Council. So, when including the International Monetary Fund and European Central Bank, its ranking slips to 40th place. However, again, if it's at a high, you don't buy gold when it's high. You buy when it's low. But it is kind of interesting that they haven't bought anything since 2013. So yeah, that's kind of a thing. And people are like, especially with the economy and the inflation, people are buying gold. We've seen commercials and things like that. Kind of the buzz is to buy gold and silver and precious metals as a hedge against inflation, and that's been kind of a big thing. I definitely did that when I was in the United States. It was great, made some great money because we bought gold when it was like $7, $8, $9 an ounce, and then later on we cashed out when it was like $22, $23, $24 an ounce, and so we made some good money on that. But the price of gold, it falls behind stocks as well. The price of gold per ounce rose 84.6% between 2013 and 2024. So, okay, it was a bunch of years, while the S&P 500 rose 367% during the same period. But again, the whole thing with gold is that it holds its value. You're not going to get a real big return, as you will, but it's not as risky as the stock market, which can wildly fluctuate. So yeah, it ends up, countries, it says here, central banks that rush to secure gold are often those with strained relations with the United States, as China, Russia, a lot of other countries. Remember kind of a number of years back where it ends up where, what was it, the BRIC, a number of nations, Russia, China, and a handful of others, that they started buying gold and to kind of put themselves into a position to maybe try to have a currency that would take over the United States dollar as a world reserve currency, and that didn't really happen. So, yeah, people are still kind of shucking and jiving for that. But the U.S. dollar is still the money system that is used for the sale and buying and selling of oil and petroleum products. So, and then there's the whole dope deal with United States and Saudi Arabia. We'll protect you. We get deals on whatever. Yeah, it's a whole thing. But with that, a lot of people are buying gold, but the banks halt sales of silver bars amid soaring demand. Banks here in Korea are halting the sales of silver bars amid surging demand, driven by increasing global uncertainties by the tariffs and the industry. Lenders also suspended sales of gold bars, which has emerged as the most popular safe haven asset in recent months. Due to the surge in gold and silver prices, the resulting spike in demand has outpaced supply. The Korean Minting and Security Printing Corporation halted its supply of gold bars to banks on Wednesday. Excuse me. So yeah, the gold exchange already suspended bank sales of 10 gram and 100 gram bars since October, but continuing to sell its 1 kilo bars. 2.2 pounds of gold. Yeah, I don't know too many people that are going to be buying those, but those are still, you can still buy those. However, with silver bar prices increasing, exchange notified banks of the suspension of the silver bar supply on Thursday. Also noted that the remaining stock of 1 kilo gold bars is no longer available. So yeah, it seems like a lot of people are buying the gold and the silver. The Korean government isn't doing that, or I should say, their Bank of Korea isn't doing that. So that's kind of interesting. The major banks affected by the suspension of the silver bar supply are KB Gukmin Bank, Shinhan Bank, Woori Bank, NH Nyanghyup Bank, that's the bank I have. Hana Bank does not sell silver bars. As gold prices recently hit record highs, a shortage of gold bars emerged. Consequently, investors turned to silver bars as an alternative, leading to a surge in demand for that. Some lenders continue selling gold and silver by depleting their inventory of what they already had. In other words, they had bought gold when it was low, so they're cashing in when the gold price is high. And yeah, you don't buy when it's high. But with that said, even with precious metals, if you start investing, think of precious metals, gold and silver, and other metals as a long-term hedge against inflation and as a long-term medium of keeping your wealth over time. So it's not something that's crypto. It's not something like, oh, it's going to go through the roof and by a year or two. That's not how it works. It's going to be a slow and steady. So if you did dollar cost averaging, in other words, if you bought a little bit of gold and a little bit of silver each month, or reoccurring over time, then eventually, kind of like dollar cost averaging with the stock market, you probably still come out ahead over time. But again, you have to look at where you bought, where you're selling, and to see if you get a profit. So that's what we got going on there. So yeah, kind of interesting things we got going on with gold and silver here, and especially since I was involved in that in the United States and we hadn't picked that up. So I have to keep an eye on the gold and silver. Maybe not the gold because we're not made of money, but maybe silver because that is the poor man's gold. At least it was in the United States. The last thing we're going to talk about is global real estate. Global investors flock to South Korea's expanding monthly rental market. Now, for those of you who don't know, there's a couple of different ways in which real estate is rented here in Korea. In the United States, you pay a deposit, maybe first and last month's rent, and then you pay a monthly fee or a monthly amount every single month. And then when you leave, you get your deposit back as long as the property is in good condition, and that's what you do. So you'll pay, $1,500, $2,000 for a place, unless you're in some crazy New York place where you're paying $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 a month. But it's a monthly rental fee that you pay. Here in Korea, it's really different because the majority of rentals are done that is called jeonse and wolse. So in other words, for the most expensive one, you have a rental property, and let's say usually the rule of thumb is that you would put down a deposit for that property that you're going to rent, and it would be about 50% of the retail price of that property. Now, you might be thinking, wow, that is insane, because if you look at a property like, this one here, and we're not in a big, bustling town or city here in Korea, so, it's not that terribly expensive like it would be in Seoul. 50% of $250,000, that's $125,000. But that deposit would go to the landlord, and then the landlord would invest that and get the interest. But the thing is, with you, the tenant, you don't have to pay that monthly fee. So, there's a trade-off. Now, there's another, and about 90% of rentals are done in this manner. Now, the problem that has popped up with this is that some landlords have taken the money and spent the money, and they did kind of like a Ponzi scheme thing. They take money from this rental, and then they spend it, and then they use the deposit money from this rental to cover this one when they leave, because they get that deposit money back after that lease term, which is usually 2 years, or you can renew it. Well, some landlords have gotten in trouble because they lost that money. They invested it into risky investments and it didn't pay off. And so now they're on the hook for a ton of money that needs to be paid back to the tenants. So yeah, there's some issues with that. Very unscrupulous landlords. Most of them are good. But with that, there's another rental way to rent properties, and that's where you pay like maybe half of what you would with the first one. So you might put down 25%, maybe 10%, 15% of the retail property price, and then you get to live there with a monthly fee that you pay, but it's less than what you would pay than with a regular United States monthly fee. So again, you're getting kind of a discount on the monthly fee with that. Then what comes in is this expanding monthly rental market, kind of what we do in the United States. It's here in Korea, but it's not as popular as the other two that we just talked about. So this is really interesting because the foreign capital market is flowing into South Korea's rental housing market as the shift to monthly rent accelerates. This is very interesting, and it could be a warning as well of what can happen in the future because other places have done this, like the United States, and this could cause some problems later on down the road. Investment banks, pension funds, and real estate companies regarded as global heavyweights are forming joint ventures with local firms that have a ton of money, and they're investing in these properties and making them monthly rental properties. And remember, we're talking about the rising demand for monthly rentals, especially among young people after the fraud crisis involving the Jeonsei Korean-style deposit leases is driving growth in the corporate rental sector, with government pushing policies to attract more businesses into the market to increase housing supply. Foreign investors are expected to keep pouring into corporate and rental housing projects. This can be problematic. You want to, you want to increase the housing supply, and so you're going to need investors that are going to build housing units and then rent them out, but they need to get a return on their money. But there's a problem with that because the investors have the keys to the kingdom with that rental property. Excuse me. So with that, they hold the keys and they can up the rents. And what we've seen in the United States is that can be detrimental. Foreign investors come in. JB plans to invest 133 billion won to develop rental housing near major business districts and universities. This is kind of similar to what we see in the United States, where big companies and corporations flooded in, bought properties on the cheap, and then they went to the monthly rent system, and if those properties had been rented in the past, they had increased the rent of those properties, 50, 60, sometimes even 100, 200%, forcing out tenants. And then, of course, you have a bunch of people that are pissed off because they can't pay the monthly mortgage, so they have to go somewhere else, and then other people come in. So it's a two-edged sword of what we end up seeing here. And the thing that caught me is Morgan Stanley purchased Gwell Home Life Gadong, a studio-type rental housing complex in Gangdong-gu, Seoul, for 13.3 billion won and remodeled it into rental housing. The U.S. private equity firm KKR also established a joint venture with Hong Kong-based living company, blah, 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 and the place that they did it in Seoul. Foreign investors are entering Korea's rental market as the housing sector increasingly moves toward monthly rental payments. So this is a change in the whole shift of what is going on in the rental market. So before, you would have these huge deposits that people would save up, give that huge deposit over to the landlord, and then they would live rent-free. They would still have to pay their utilities and so on and so forth on their own dime, but there was no rent price, monthly rental fee. So that allowed Koreans to save a lot more money than what we would see in the United States in our rental market. Now that is slowly going away, and we also see more and more people that are not saving as much money as they used to. The older generations, after the Korean War, they saved up money because they remembered the Korean War. And they wanted to do good for themselves and their families, so they saved a lot of money. They made a lot of money, they socked it away, and boom, they were able to have, and provide those huge deposits. Now, not so much the case. And we're even getting to a place of where we end up having, younger generations that are that YOLO, you only live once, and they're having more and more consumer debt on their platter than their parents or the people before them. And it's causing a bit of a problem because, they'll rent a place out, but they want to look like they're rich. And it's just very, very problematic. But the problem with this in the housing sector as it goes towards more a monthly rental thing is like what I said before, is that, you're going to be able to provide some housing, but as time goes on, what's going to happen with these corporations, these foreign corporations, combined with Korean companies that are buying up these housing districts and renting these places out on a monthly basis, it's like, oh, everything's a monthly fee now. Your music, your internet, or this, that, the phone, everything's a monthly fee. I might as well do your housing as a monthly fee as well. There's some good and some bad with it, but later on down the road, like we said in the United States, it usually ends up a lot of people get priced out of housing. And so now later on down the road, there's going to be this division of people here in Korea, just like we saw in the United States. There was a documentary that I watched a long time ago, a number of years ago, and it talked about how these people were living in a manufactured home, a trailer park, basically. Manufactured home, trailers. And for those of you who don't know, it's a small prefab house, really small, and it's inexpensive housing. And usually what you end up doing is paying a monthly rent, but you also pay a lot fee. Well, what some big corporations ended up doing is buying up entire trailer park homes or prefab home housing subdivisions that worked off of this premise. And you had people that were being charged double. They're given notice saying, hey, well, we sold the place and now the new owners are going to up the rent by 100% or more. And so that basically, because of the lack of housing, that they were able to do that and charge such crazy prices because they're in areas that there's not a lot of housing, so they can charge those prices. But the problem is that you got to get rid of the people that can't pay that. And so the affordable housing eventually down the road is going to go away. Now, there's always going to be some form of lower or cheaper available housing, but you can't ignore the fact that what's going to happen is that once you get privatized in big businesses that swallow up entire housing districts and neighborhoods and things like that, forcing out the mom and pop businesses who do rentals and so on and so forth, it is really going to cause some problems. And when you combine that with the fact that most people have a lot of consumer debt, where, it's we're talking decades down, maybe a decade or so down the road, these corporations are going to keep increasing the pricing of those rentals because they're going to make money. That is their goal, and they have a responsibility to their investors to get a good return. And they will push that up to the limit, and they do their market research and so on and so forth. So, it's just going to get very interesting. In the article, it says, according to the Korea Housing Institute report in 2025, Housing Outlook, Market Outlook, and Policy Direction, the monthly rental demand is expected to grow as the population reaching age 30 increases from an average of 673,000 annually between 2018 and 2021 to around 750,000 after 2023. So, it's... what it comes down to is the foreign capital and the investment that's needed to buy up all these properties. You have to partner up with somebody, some huge companies to be able to do this that have a lot of money. And the real estate development market anticipates that once the bill passes, foreign capital's entry into the domestic rental housing market will accelerate as the domestic Housing lease market still differs from countries where monthly rent is well established. Foreign firms are expected to continue entering through joint ventures with local companies. So, yeah, companies are not going to come into a country and buy properties where they cannot make money and they're going to make money all the way down the road. And so the whole idea the thing is that when you have a ton of money, you can make deals and get good returns, so you're going to buy low. So I'm assuming what they would probably do is go into areas where you have depressed real estate prices. These companies are going to come in, they're going to buy the properties, they're going to have a monthly rent, and they're going to make it so that monthly rent gives them a good return. There's nothing wrong with that. But the problem is that once all these corporations, and you just have a handful of corporations that have a hold on a huge segment of the housing, that's where things are going to get interesting, and that's where you're going to start seeing people priced out of the housing market altogether. And so that's going to cause some division within the country. Again, mom and pop little rental places are going to go away. They're going to be hey, you need money. It is what it is. But in the long run, I don't know. I'm for affordable housing. I'm totally for that. But then again, you can also see the dangers of what happens when big corporations and companies come in and they end up saying, hey, we're going to buy all the rental properties in this, or we're going to buy all the houses in this, and we're going to make them rentals. In the United States, what's interesting is that in my experience of doing real estate investing, and I had over like 18, maybe 20 homes, things like that. We had a family business together. We had a ton of homes that we had, at least for us anyway, as a family business, and then that all got defrauded by family. It was a horrible thing. But with that, when you go into a well-established neighborhood where people own their homes, those properties are nicer than areas that have rentals. And so generally over time, what I've seen in my experience, and it's not indicative of all rental properties in the United States, but what I saw in southern Colorado, in Oklahoma, those two places, that if you have a good neighborhood with no rentals, you got a really nice neighborhood. When you start getting one or two rentals in there, it's not too bad. But then you start getting more and more rental properties, then the quality of those properties starts going down. The quality of people starts going down. And it could be very interesting. So I've seen entire neighborhoods go from people who own their homes to where the majority of the properties became rental properties, and it ended up becoming trash. And that all has to do because of the tenants that they brought in didn't make as much money. They didn't really care for the home because they weren't buying it. But with that being said, is that what's going to happen in Korea? I don't think so, because Korea and the Korean people are different than the United States. And generally, as a whole, Korean people are more respectful and polite. And if they're a tenant, they take that responsibility of taking care of the property, I say generally better than what I saw in the United States. So, and they had more to lose, So when you put down like 50% of the retail price of that property as your deposit, you're going to take care of that property because you don't want to lose your money, which is a huge chunk of money. So you're not going to damage the property. You're going to take care of it like it's your own because you have a big investment into that property. In the United States, we don't have that. Unless you're buying the property, that is your huge investment into the property. Whereas rental, majority of the time, from my experience, is that people that rent don't take care of their property as well as homeowners. So will this happen here in Korea? I'm not exactly sure. It'll be very interesting. And again, it all comes down to the changing demographic, the difference between older Koreans and younger Koreans, how much debt they have. Morality comes into the issue of but I definitely think that Koreans have more respect and they're more polite, more civil, and more mature as a whole than most Americans. And it's kind of weird to say that. But again, America's huge. So there's entire neighborhoods, there's counties where people are awesome and incredible, kind of like there's probably Americans watching this, and you're probably awesome and incredible, and you're renting out your or you're renting a property. You take care of it as it is, as if it was your own. And I love people like you. But the fact is that during those years I was involved in rental real estate and rehab rentals, it just went downhill over the decade or so. And yeah, so it's the downward trend is unfortunate, and there are a lot of good people out there, but over time it seems to erode away that aspect. And then it's harder for people to buy properties. Of course, then rent goes up because there's a demand for rent because people can't buy properties. But then again, you get to this place in your rent where it's like, well, you can't charge high rent, so then you have to lower your standards just to keep the property rented because you have to pay the mortgage. And so you get a lower quality tenant, and you're just trying to break even, which is the majority of what a lot of investors do, is break even over the year, with their expenses and their write-offs and so on and so forth. The buy and hold method, where the hope is, as long as I break even, maybe make a little bit of money here and there, and I'll just throw that back into the emergency fund of the property. The payoff is down the road, like 15, 20 years, 25 years when I pay off the property. Then it becomes a cash cow. Then it's the mortgage is paid off, and now making the majority of that rent price that I charge is going to be profit. And then I can do an exchange and sell that property. I can exchange it. I can go into fourplex or eightplex or apartments and kind of do that whole route. But yeah, it's really squirrely. I think Korea will be in a better place than in what I've seen in the United States, just because Koreans are more respectful and more mature and more civil, and they take care of things better than Americans as a whole, from what I've seen in my experience. It's not indicative of everything in the United States, but it still concerns me that you're going to have big corporations and big banks that are going to be swooping in and taking housing areas, and they're going to be one holding the reins. And I think it's, but it is what it is. If people can't afford to buy property, or they don't want to buy property, the younger generation, for whatever reason, because they can't or they won't, somebody's going to come in and do that for them. And that's what we'll end up seeing here in Korea. So the rental market is going to be interesting. And again, as with anything else, you're going to buy when it's low, which now is a good time in Korea. I'd say within, with this tariff thing and the economy that's going on, I'd say within the next 2 years would probably be a great time to buy property in Korea. Depending on where it's at, you can get the lower prices. Koreans are generally property rich, but asset, money poor. So they have a lot of consumer debt, but they have properties, but those properties are mortgaged, so they have debt. And so there's a good opportunity to make some good deals. For example, like the deal that we got in this place. We had a motivated seller, and it was a screaming deal. It was so much of a deal because we only wanted to buy a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, but this is a 4-bedroom, 2-bath, but the deal was so good, and we had cash on hand, that we went outside of our budget of what we were going to spend because the deal was so good. And as of this video, which is, the 15th of February 2025, when we bought our property and what the property is going for now, I'd say it's probably about, let me see if I'm doing my math right. Plug in some numbers. There's probably about 35, maybe $40,000 difference when we bought this property to what the property is priced on now. But again, location. Okay. We're in an area where there is a good rental market because of the local U.S. military base. So, and that's the reason why I picked this place, because it had good returns on rents. So, but we were able to get a good property at a time where the economy was not doing well, people are mortgaged and they're in debt and they need to sell to either break even or let's just try to make a little bit and cut our losses and run. And that's what we ended up doing, is getting a motivated seller. So after that happened, and then we saw the steady increase in this property as what we see today. So that's kind of good for us, and it's paid off. So eventually, when we buy another apartment, buy low, and it will be a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, hopefully. We're going to downsize because we're getting older, and then we'll pay that one off, and we'll live in the 3-bedroom, 2-bath, and with this 4-2, we'll rent that out, and that'll be another income stream. So yeah, it's just took a long time to be able to buy property. You know, many years and working overtime and side jobs and gigs and whatever. Both of us working. Paying off mortgages and things like that. It's, you know, things that normal people don't do. But if you do the things that most people won't do, you will be in a position later in life where you'll have a life that most people won't have. So yeah, that's kind of the thing that we're looking at here. So anyway, that's what we got going on here. Being retired in Korea, we talked about knives, tariffs, gold, silver, and of course the rental market. So that's kind of interesting. And I'm Steve, the retired hobby tech guy. And if you like the video, give it a like and subscribe. I would appreciate that. And for those of you who don't know, these are the people who bought me coffee. They're awesome people, have much respect for them, and you can be on that list as well. So there's a link in the description box down below. I do hobby videos, a bunch of hobby stuff, paint miniatures, laser engraving, resin printing. I'm going to get into 3D FDM printing and also getting a bigger laser engraver somewhere down the road. And if you're a company, I'll do reviews, but I'll do honest reviews. So if you don't like what I say, it is what it is. But with that, I also have the email address here for those people that are interested and wondering how I retired here in Korea with my spouse. It's kind of a little niche thing, but I've got some videos on that. But I will say that whoever emails me, I 100% reply to everybody. So whether it's with hobbies or being retired in Korea, how we got our visas and sharing our experiences, you can contact me through that email down below. And yeah, because I'm retired and yeah, it gives me something to do. So with that being said, what do you think of what's going on with the tariffs in Korea and what Trump is doing? Do you think leveling the playing field is a good thing? What do you think about the gold and silver and the rental market? How is the rental market where you live? Is it good, bad, indifferent? Are rental prices going really high? Do you rent from another individual, like a mom and pop who is renting you, a house or something like that? Or are you renting from a corporation or a business a company that just swallowed up a bunch of homes and they're, raising the price on rents? Have you had rental price increases? I'd like to read that in the comment section down below as well. So with that being said, that is so good. It is time to go, and we will see you on the next video. And I appreciate you. I appreciate you all for watching. I really do. And we will see you on the next video. Okay? Peace. Good stuff.